Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Janmadyasya Yatonvaya Ditarata Sharte Shvabhigya Swarat Tene Brahma Hridhaya Radhikavaye Muyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sadha Narastokuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Okay, so we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th Canto, Chapter 6, verse 28 through 40. So I'll just begin that process. It's a lot of verses. They don't have purports, it seems. So this translation starting with verse 28. When the Brahmanas got up from bed and saw the water pot empty, they inquired who had done this work of drinking the water meant for begetting a child. Next verse. When the Brahmanas came to understand that the king, inspired by the supreme controller, had drunk the water, they all exclaimed, "Alas, the power of providence is real power. No one can counteract the power of the supreme." In this way, they offered their respectful obeisances unto the Lord. Thereafter, in due course of time, a son with all the good symptoms of a powerful king came forth from the lower right side of King Yuvanashra's abdomen. So the baby cried so much for breast milk that all the Brahmanas were very unhappy. "Who will take care of this baby?" they said. Then Indra, who was worshipped in that yajna, came and solaced the baby. "Do not cry," Indra said. Then Indra put his index finger in the baby's mouth and said, You may drink me." Oops, okay. Because Yuvanashra, the father of the baby, was blessed by the Brahmanas, he did not fall a victim to death. After this incident, he performed severe austerities and achieved perfection in that very spot. Mandhata, the son of Yuvanashra, was a cause of fear for Ravana and other thieves and rogues who caused anxiety. O King Parikshit, because they feared him, the son of Yuvanashra was known as Trasadasyu, which means one who punishes criminals. This name was given by King Indra. By the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the son of Yuvanashra was so powerful that when he became emperor, he ruled the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, without any second ruler. Okay, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not different from the auspicious aspects of great sacrifices, such as the ingredients of the sacrifice, the chanting of Vedic hymns, the regulative principles, the performer, the priest, the result of the sacrifice, the arena of sacrifice, and the time of sacrifice. Knowing the principles of self-realization, Mandhata worshipped that transcendentally situated Supreme Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, who comprises all the demigods. He also gave immense charity to the Brahmanas, and thus he performed yajna to worship the Lord. All places from where the sun rises on the horizon, shining brilliantly to where the sun sets, are known as the possession of the celebrated Mandhata, the son of Yuvanashva. Mandata begot 3 sons in the womb of Bindumati, the daughter of Shashabhindu. These sons were Purukutsa, Ambarisha, and Muchukunda, a great mystic yogi. These 3 brothers had 50 sisters who all accepted the great sage Sobhari as their husband. And last 2 verses here. Sobhari Rishi was engaged in austerity deep in the water of the river Jamuna when he saw a pair of fish engaged in sexual affairs. Thus, he perceived the pleasure of sex life, and, induced by this desire, he went to King Mandhata and begged for one of the king's daughters. In response to this request, the king said, "O Brahmana, any of my daughters may accept any husband to her personal selection," which doesn't fare well for him because he's old and kind of deteriorated. So why would they accept him? It's going to be a little bit of dilemma as the story goes forward. Prabhupada's purport here is very short. This is the beginning of the story of Sobhari Rishi. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Mandhata was the king of Mathura, and Sobhari Rishi was engaged in austerity while submerged deep within the river Jamuna. When the Rishi felt sexual desire, he emerged from the water and went to King Mandhata to ask that one of the king's daughters become his wife. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, it's like a lot going on here, and I don't know if I'm not going to be able to do justice to all the things that are happening. But in short, as we've been hearing about the lineage of sons that come from Vaivasvata Manu. And as it is told in the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, Mavantarena Sat Dharma, the purpose of hearing about the lives of the Manus and the various kings and saintly persons who appear in the ages that are ruled by Manus is because their lives teach us something about the principles of true Dharma, Sat Dharma. And so there is much to learn in that regard. Someone's computer needs to be muted, I think, right? Or something. It's like some sound is coming. I don't know. Okay. So their lives are to teach us something about Sat Dharma. So that is why we hear a long list of lineages, and then suddenly the Bhagavatam will zoom in on someone because their life has something to teach us about how to live in this world, reconciling ourselves with the various forces in this world in such a way that we can do it gracefully and skillfully. In the material world, people don't have skill for how to live in this world. They live quite unskillfully. And the result of unskillful living is they suffer a lot. Of course, the world is itself fundamentally suffering, but we invite more suffering into our world because we don't know how to navigate it skillfully. It's just like if you were a child and you were put into some car and you don't know how to drive the car. So then you'll get yourself into a lot of trouble. So we don't know all the various forces that are acting in this world. And so we invite more suffering into our world, even though the world itself is already suffering. So you hear about the lives of these great kings and saints that appear in the age of Manu because they teach us something about Sat Dharma, how to live skillfully in this world. So that's what, just because in ninth canto especially, you encounter a lot of these long lists of say, it's kind of boring actually. You become a little bored. Why all these names? So that's the idea. They give lineage and then they zoom in on certain characters. Their life has something to teach us about Sat Dharma, the true Dharma, the way to live in this world in such a way that you can live in harmony with the environment and also progress toward the true reality. This is called the Principle of Sat Dharma. So we're hearing about the lineage coming from Vaivasvata Manu. So they've come all the way down to this character named Yuvanashva. Yuvanashva was quite a renounced person. So even though he was married, he ended up leaving his wives and going to the forest to perfect his life spirituality. This is a little bit atypical, but it did happen in this culture. And at one point, he was in the forest, and the wives were very distressed. Naturally, he did not give son to continue the lineage, so they were also distressed. So the Brahmanas wanted to pacify the wives of King Yuvanashra, so they made some yagya, and in the yagya there was some like some water that was there, or some substance was there that was meant to be drunk by the queen so they can get pregnant. By the arrangement of providence, Yuvanashra himself drank that oblation. He was sleeping. Later, he came upon this yagya, and then he drank the thing, and he became pregnant somehow. I guess man can have babies. Anyway, so then the sages, and what we've read just now, they said this is the arrangement of providence which cannot be thwarted by anyone, which is itself a kind of interesting point, that whatever is one's destiny or providence as ordained by the Supreme Lord, then it cannot be thwarted by any means necessary. So he wanted to get out of this problem, maybe. That is the sense of the reading there. But he was not able to get around it because it was by providential arrangement he was meant to have children. So he ends up having one child named Mandhata. The name Mandhata comes because this child, because the yagya that the Brahmanas performed was to Indra. And the child, after appearing from the right abdomen of this man, Yuvanashra, he was crying and creating big disturbance. So the Brahmanas were like, how to stop this kid from crying? So Indra appeared and he gave his finger, and the finger was like feeding the child. And so the child got the name Mandata because Indra himself said, Mandata, that from my finger I'll feed this child and he'll be nursed by me. So later on, this child became very powerful, Mandata, and he ended up ruling the whole Bhumanda. Later on, he had a wife, and he had children in his wife, and 3 sons and 50 daughters. At one point, these 50 daughters got married to one man, yogi named Sobhari Muni. So Shukadeva said, why Sobhari Muni is marrying 50 daughters? What is this? What is the background story behind this? So now this story is beginning to be told in brief here by Shukadeva Goswami. And that brings us to the present verse. So Sobhari Muni, he was engaged in austerity deep in the waters of the river Jamuna when he saw a pair of fish engaged in sexual affairs. So this is the beginning of his problem. Jamun mantar jale magnas tapyamana paramtapa. So he was engaged in supreme austerity in the river of the Jamuna. Nevritem minarajasa drishtra mituna dharmina. Suddenly he sees the fish, Minarajhasya, the king of fish, Maituna Dharmina, enjoy sexual affairs. So this is the beginning of problem is Asat Sangha. He got the bad association by seeing. Even seeing is considered problematic in the material world. For the pure devotees, it is described when they see objects in this world, the objects enter inside their psyche and are burned up by the fire of their awareness of Krishna. But for the rest of us, when the objects enter into our mind, they build nice house there and create big disturbance inside. So it is also said, just by seeing, you can do a satsanga and become implicated in the affairs of samsara. There are one nice verses there. And Puri, they were trying to get Mahaprabhu to give darshan to Patapa Rudra Maharaj. Patapa Rudra Maharaj, though, is a materialistic king as far as Mahaprabhu is concerned, and he is a sannyasi. So a sannyasi should not associate with materialistic kings. And they knew Mahaprabhu was very strict on this point. So the devotees were planning for a long time how to get opportunity to Patapa Rudra Maharaj to get association of Mahaprabhu. So at one point, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he inquired from Mahaprabhu. He says, "Dear Mahaprabhu, can I submit a question to you without fear? Because the fear is that if we ask Mahaprabhu to give darshan to a materialistic person, Mahaprabhu will leave immediately and give up Puri. So he said, can I ask one question without the fear? So Mahaprabhu said, yes, you can ask, but if it is reasonable, it will be accepted. And if it is not reasonable, it will be rejected. So finally, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he's asking, why don't you give darshan to Pataparudra Maharaj? He is your great bhakta. He is not just a materialistic king, he is your great bhakta. So in response to that, Mahaprabhu speaks this particular verse. I'm sharing it here on the screen so you can see it. Niskinchanasya bhagava bhajuno mukasya param param jigamishwa bhavasagharasya. So if you are very eager to do Hari Bhajan, Bhagava Bhajana Umukasya, you have Umukasya means you are very eager to engage in Bhagavat Bhajan. Niskinchanasya, and a person is niskinchana, means he doesn't have the material possessions, or it means that he is not, the word akinchana means without material possessions. Generally, Gaudiyas are like that. They don't have much. Akinchana can also mean one who is just having pure bhakti. So he is not attached to the material objects. So for such a person who is eager to do Bhagavat Bhajan, and he is also param param jigamishura bhavasagarasa, he wants to cross to the other side of the material ocean. So then there's two obstacles that are mentioned here. This is from Mahaprabhu speaking. Sandarshana vishayinam atayoshitam cha. He says to see a vishayi, someone who is enjoying the sense objects, ha hanta hanta vishabhakshana topya sadhu. That is worse than drinking poison willingly. So if you, better to drink poison willingly than to see, sandarshanam, than to see a vishayi, someone who is enjoying the sense objects. You know, I think about this verse in the context of like digital media world. We have a big problem in the 21st century. We have a big problem. At least per this particular verse, we have a big problem. Because it says just by seeing the materialistic person, then you will become implicated in samsara. There's another verse when Mahaprabhu is preaching to Sanatan Goswami, Sanatan Shiksha. So he says his famous verse, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnavachar. The behavior of a Vaishnav is that he gives up Asat Sangha. Then he's, what is Asat Sangha? He says, Tri Sangi, Eka Asadu Krishna Abhakta Ar. He says Asat Sangha is Sri Sangha, association with the object of sexual desire, basically. And Eka Krishna Abhakta Ar. And the other one is simply a non-devotee. I always find it to be a funny like categorization. He could have just said non-devotee, but he said to associate with the object of sexual desire. That is one type of a satsanga. And the other one is simply a bhakta, Krishna bhakta. He's simply not a devotee. That is a satsanga. If you do that, then you will become implicated. So then Mahaprabhu quotes one verse after that. I should pull this verse up also. He quotes one verse after that said that it is better to be surrounded, be locked in a cage with a tiger, and the cage itself is surrounded by fire, than to do the satsanga. Better if you had a choice between the two, then better to stay in the cage. Also, there's one other story. I think this is in Sri Sampradaya. Ramanujacharya, this is such a heavy thing. It's as if you're in a building and the building is burning down and you have ability to take shelter of a temple of a demigod worshiper. That means a pious person. Then you had better stay in the burning building. Like so extra. So the idea here is that these satsanga is so dangerous because by seeing this, the point that we're making is just by seeing a materialistic persons, they create impressions, or you can say they trigger impressions of material enjoyment in our own psyche. And they can open up a dam of material impressions, drowning out our enthusiasm for Bhagavat Bhajan. So Mahaprabhu says, he's giving this warning, actually. He's saying this thing here. Sandarshana vishayina atayoshi tamcha ha hanta hanta vishabhakshana topya sadhu. Better you drink the poison than to do the asat sangha. So that is how dangerous the asat sangha is. But what if you are a liberated person? So Bhari Muni is called as Jiva Mukta. He is liberated person from Maya. Certainly he cannot be affected by the asat sangha. So then this question is also a very important question that's explored here in this story of Sobhari Muni. So first point we want to make, I think we've made it as clear as possible, that just by seeing a materialistic person, this is the problem that Sobhari Muni's had. Drishtra maituna dharmina. Just by seeing some fish, that was also asat sangha only. You can do the asat sangha with the fish also. So just by seeing the fish enjoying, just by seeing, he gave up his practice. He was doing yoga practice inside Jamuna. He gave up that yoga practice and came out of the water. Jata spriha nirpram vipra kanyam ekam ayachata. He came out of the water and began to enjoy with 50 daughters of King Yuvanashra. So this is a very astonishing thing. First of all, you're doing austerity and the Jamuna for something I think they said like 10,000 years. That's a long time. So you must imagine a lot of his faculties must have atrophied also by this time. You're in the water for such a long period. And how is it that he could be attracted to such a thing as fish enjoying? How did that trigger the impressions for enjoyment inside his mind? He is a great yogi. Obviously, someone meditating in Jamuna like that for such a long period of time must be a great personality, not an ordinary personality at least. So he's called as Jiva Mukta. So the word Jiva Mukta means one who is liberated even while in the material body. And liberated here means they do not identify with the material body. That doesn't mean Jiva Mukta. They're completely unidentified with the material body. Even though they're inside the material body, sometimes examples given of coconut, and when it becomes very ripe, the skin that is on the shell of the coconut, I guess, how you say, like, it comes off. And then if you shake the coconut, you can hear the skin inside. So although it's there inside, it is not actually attached to the shell of the coconut. So Jiva Mukta is compared to such a person. Although inside the body, he's not actually attached to the body. His awareness is he's fully aware of his ontological position as different from matter. This is the meaning of Jiva Mukta. So there are two types of Jiva Muktas. One type of Jiva Muktas become like that from Gyan. Another type of Jiva Mukta come to that position by Bhakti. There are two types. One called Gyani Jiva Mukta, another Bhakta. By Bhakti they come. So for these Gyanis who perform the process of Gyan Yoga, and there has some elements of Bhakti in it also, but they're Gyanis and they come to the position of Jiva Mukti by this process of Gyan, supported by Bhakti. If they, after coming to the position of Jiva Mukta, commit some offense to Bhagavan or to devotees, then they can fall from the position of Jiva Mukta. There's nice verses there from Bhagavad Puran. Ye anye aravindakshavi muktamaninas twai asta bhava avashuddha bhudaya. What's this famous line? The part of the shloka that is the important part I'm not able to remember. Param, what is the line here? I should pull it up here. The 10th canto, chapter 2. This is Lord Brahma speaking prayers to Krishna. So the verse says, there are persons who ye anye aravindakshavi muktamaninas. They think themselves liberated. Why do they think themselves liberated? Because they are Jiva Mukta, so they got some liberation there actually. It is not that they're lying about it. They think themselves liberated, but Tvai asta bhavat, if they're without feeling for the Supreme Lord, if they have no bhava for the Supreme Lord, then avishuddha bhudaya, their buddhi is not fully purified. Aruhya krichena parampadam tatapatantya da ananta tayushmanangraya. Even though they perform great austerity to come to the position of Jiva Mukta, they fall down from that position due to their aversion to the Supreme Lord. This verse is spoken by Lord Brahma. Now I'm trying to find it here. I think it's verse number 30, 31, 29. Where is it at? This one, 32. So why they fall down if they're Jiva Mukta? How they fall down? So our Acharyas is saying, Kaviraj Goswami specifically, Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is due to offense. They make offense. And the Acharyas quote a few verses, and I've pulled them up here. I'm not sure all of the verses. They're basically saying the same idea. But it says here, Jiva Mukta api punar yanti samsara bhasanam. Yadi achinta mahashakto bhagavati aparadhina. Jiva mukta apipuna. Even though you are jiva mukta, if by the inconceivable potency of the Lord you commit offense to him, bhagavati aparadhina, then yanti samsara bhasanam, then you enter samsara bhasanam. Samsara bhasana means the imprints in your mind, the impressions of samsara. So that means the impressions of your experiences of enjoyment in the world. You enter into that because of offense to the Supreme Lord or to his devotees. Then samsara bhasana, all the desires that were kind of like being held back, suddenly the floodgates open and you find yourself implicated in samsara again. Just because of committing the offense to Bhagavan or one of his devotees. So how is it? So Bhari Muni was Jiva Mukta. He's in Jamuna water for 10,000 years doing his practice. And he sees some fish, and all of a sudden, Yanti Samsara Vasana. He enters into that Samsara Vasana, comes out of the water, and wants and enjoys with the 50 daughters of Yuvanashra. And he'll tell his own story coming up. He becomes implicated in the material life. So how did that happen? So if you go to the pastime and Krishna book where Krishna chastises Kaliya. So Shukadeva Goswami wants to know why it is that Kaliya took shelter of the Jamuna River. So the story was going that Garuda, one of his natural foodstuffs is snakes. So there's one place where Kaliya is from, I think it's called Nagalaya. In that place of serpents, Garuda was coming all the time and having buffet. So, they were getting a little disturbed. So they went to Lord Brahma and said, come on, this guy is coming all the time, having feasts and making big disturbance to our community. What can we be done? So some arrangement was made that Garuda would chill out with the buffet style, but some sacrifice should be offered like periodically. And that way Garuda would just take the sacrifice and leave the community alone. So they agreed to this sacrifice. So Kaliya, he was one of the strongest people in that community. His poison became very powerful. He had 10 hoods, so many hoods. So he became very powerful. He became very arrogant. So he was like, why this fellow should get the sacrifice? So he himself went and just ate the sacrifice, thinking that he could challenge Garuda. So Garuda became furious and said, I'll chastise this fellow. So they began fighting, and Garuda was really thrashing him with his wings and with the fury that you would expect from a carrier of Lord Vishnu. So at one point, realizing that he would be killed, Kaliya went to the Jamuna because he was aware that Garuda was not able to enter into the Jamuna. And the reason he was not able to enter the Jamuna because Bhari Muni was there doing his practice even that time. And Garuda would sometimes come there to eat the fish. So at one point, the fish were being very disturbed. So Bhari Muni had compassion toward the fish. And he told Garuda that if you keep eating here, I'll give one curse to you. Now, Garuda is the carrier of Lord Vishnu, so there's no question of him being cursed or anything. But he wanted to honor the words of Bhari Muni. So he said, all right. But I'll just take this one last thing. So the last fish he took was like the king of the fish. And so the whole community became disturbed. This Guru was like, all right, just this last time, then I'll leave. But he took the king only. So the whole fish community was very much disturbed. So Bhari Muni, feeling compassion for the fish, he became. Now, we should keep in mind that fish is a natural foodstuff for a bird or ego in this particular case, or one who's having form of ego. So there is no impropriety here. Or if you say there's some impropriety, this is a natural course of nature. Nature itself exists in a dominance hierarchy. I know modern humans don't like to hear this point anymore because they believe in this impossible egalitarianism that is not actually achievable in the material world. You cannot create a society. You cannot create a society on the material platform, a perfectly equal society, because of our differences and because of nature existing in a natural dominance hierarchy. Jivo jivasa jivanam. The weak are the food for the strong. That is a natural system in the material world. And that system plays itself out in human society also. And it can only be, let's say, it can only be, how you could say, it cannot be removed, but it can be, let's say, sanctified or purified in human society only when tethered to the principle of God consciousness. But if humans refuse to, develop their awareness and put it on Krishna, then that also plays itself out in humanity. So the weak will become the food for the strong, and the strong will dominate and destroy the weak. So that is natural system in nature. So there is no transgression in the animal society, especially when this is playing itself out. No one laments when a tiger eats a deer, because that is a natural system. So Garuda is not, there is no transgression on Garuda's part. That's what I'm trying to say. But somehow Sobari Muni was taking compassion. So when Garuda took the king of fish, he cursed him that if you come again to this Jamuna, immediately you will die. You will be killed. So that curse was an offense to Garuda, because Garuda is great bhakta of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So for that offense, what happened? Jiva mukta apipunar yanti samsara vasana. Because he committed this offense, he had to enter samsara vasana. Even though he was jiva mukta, even though he was liberated from the material concept of life, he was like the coconut skin that had ripened and therefore had separated itself from the body. Even though he had such exalted awareness, because of that offense, yanti samsara vasana, he had to enter samsara vasana. That means all the impressions came. So how did it manifest? It manifests, he saw some fish. And by seeing them, all the impressions in his mind became triggered, and he was not able to resist the force of those impressions. So he entered in samsara vasana. He became a materialistic person for a period. And you'll hear him tell his own story. Someone's computer. It sounds like someone's eating something. Mute the computer. Okay. So he became a materialist for some time, and he'll tell his own story coming up, and he'll lament about it. But the point here is that how is it that just by seeing he became implicated? Is because he committed aparad. So my time is running out here, so I'm gonna just gloss over this last point. But Jiva Goswami says that when you commit aparad, there are 5 effects of aparad that come up. One of which is the slackening of bhakti, the slackening of devotion. And then from the slackening of devotion, then the entering into sensual enjoyment, rasa swada, you become a materialistic person. So it happens, we are living in a society of devotees. And if we commit offenses to devotees, then you will discover this reality too, that your bhakti will slacken. And the way it's like, very interesting how it happens, at least from my observation. Like, honestly, I can say personally and vicariously. The way that it happens is that you will start finding faults with everything around you, finding faults with the practice, finding faults with the philosophy, and finding faults with everyone around you. That's how it usually starts manifesting. So when you see the faults, you think, what is this bhakti? How is it helping? It's not making, these people are not good. It is not helping them. You start thinking in this particular way. So your bhakti practices start slackening. Then after that, you become enthusiastic about material enjoyment. And then you want to, first maybe it starts off with the, computer stuff. And then you go out and try to chase the objects of sensual enjoyment. So this happens even for liberated persons. If they commit the offense to Bhagavan or his devotees, then they have to also enter this samsara vasana, a very dangerous thing. So this is Sobari Muni's his story. It's a tale of woe, because he committed offense to a great bhakta. So one point we are learning, don't see. Even seeing materialistic person can be asat sangha. You can become implicated. That is one idea. Another idea here is that even if you are a liberated person, if you commit offense, you can become implicated in material desires because of that offense. So one should be very careful about committing the offenses. And there are some side ideas that could be extrapolated, but such as the consequence of Sobari Muni's compassion to fish. Compassion is always considered like as the most wonderful quality, but that compassion is a wonderful quality when it's aligned with the truth. Any virtue in this world, including compassion, when not based on reality, becomes a fault, actually. The virtue itself becomes the cause of your downfall because it is not aligned with the reality. Another example where our acharyas give a lot of commentary on this is Bharat Maharaj's story. Because of his compassion towards a deer, he apparently lost his bhajan and take birth as a deer. Now, of course, there are more esoteric points to that particular story, but the more external point that is given by our acharyas is this point, that because of his compassion, he lost his bhajan. So everyone all the time talking compassion, compassion, but that compassion has to also be aligned with the truth. Otherwise, that compassion becomes a fault that's powerful enough to actually erode your bhajan. So we have to be careful. Even nowadays, devotees argue with each other. Actually, a lot of devotees that argue with each other, they do so in the name of compassion. And they're back and forth with each other. In compassion, they commit offense to each other. Then that will be very problematic for their bhajan. And actually, oftentimes, I don't ask this because I'm trying to improve my own bhajan, but oftentimes it is interesting. I'm curious when this thing happens. I'm like, how y'all bhajan looking? Y'all sit here talking smack to each other, being very harsh. How's that bhajan looking? How's that chant? How your japa going? How your study of shastra? How your hearing of Harikatha going? How your worship of the deity going? What's going on there? I'm curious to know. Honestly, I'm curious. Obviously, it is not very respectful to ask someone that question, but so I would not do that. But it is a curious thing that you can look out for in the course of developing. So these are some quick ideas. There a lot more could be developed here, but my time is out. I do like to leave some room for questions if anyone has any. I don't like to take up the entirety of the time. Because someone may have some other angle they want to pursue. So I'll stop there, and see if anyone wants to say anything. Ask any question. Okay, there's a question in the house also. We'll get online first, and then Wes.
I don't know if anyone can.
Yeah, someone wants to ask question here online. Okay, we have question here in house.
Okay, a quick question.
And I have a question.
Okay, hold on. Someone is having question here, and I'll repeat the question and then ask the next question. Yes,
Okay.
Tosi.
The question is that a satsanga could be even associating with somebody that's not a bhakta,
Right.
and how does that work for like preaching? If someone is open to Krishna consciousness and they're not a bhakta, obviously you have to associate with
Right.
them. So I was just
Yeah.
what you have to say for that.
So a satsang, we were saying, means also associating with someone who's simply not a devotee. So how does that reconcile itself to our preaching concept? You have to preach. So in preaching, there's association. So how does it work out there? How does it play itself out there? So yeah, it comes down to understanding what is this association. And this question comes up a lot for devotees. So the best answer that I got, or the one that I appreciate the most, is from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his essays on Upadeshamrita verses 2 and 3. They made one book out of it, Bhakti Aloka. One of amazing essays. So there he describes association as the engaging in the 6 loving exchanges with love. He says, if you do those 6 loving exchanges out of duty, it is not association. He says sometimes you're in a particular situation where there's gift giving because there's you're duty bound to do that. Suppose you have some job and someone's birthday is there, so you go and get some Hallmark card, happy birthday. And it's done out of the duty, but not really with the affection inside. So he said that is not association because it is not done with the affection inside. You're just doing it out of a course of duty. But he says when you do the 6 loving exchanges with the affection inside, then that is called as association. So to do so out of duty. So for devotees who are preaching, they don't really associate in the sense that we normally think of the word association, like the exchange of ideas, the exchange of hearts in that sense. They see that I have a duty to Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu has given this order to the whole Sampradaya to go out and distribute this Christian consciousness. So I'm fulfilling that duty. And if we have madhyam awareness, so madhyam awareness means, what is that verse? Ishware tadadhineshu, balisheshu dushashucha, prema maitri kripa upaksha, right? This is a madhyam bhagavata Srimad Bhagavatam saying. So these 4 entities, right? Ishvara, and tadadineshu means bhakta, and the balisheshu means innocent people who are like children, and the envious people. So madhyam awareness sees these 4 entities. And to Ishvara, they offer their love, prema is the word used. To the bhaktas, they offer their friendship. That is association. That means 6 loving exchanges with the affection. And to the Bali Sheshu, ignorant, childish people, they are offering kripa, right? Mercy. What is a kripa there? I got myself this kripa. You also take it. That is natural. Like whenever you're in a happy mood, you also want other people around you to be happy, isn't it? I see it in New York. This is a perverted reflection, but when people get drunk, so they're in a happy mood, then they also want you to be happy mood. That is nature of happiness. And when you're suffering, you cause suffering to others. So you got some kripa, you're in a happy mood, so you also want to give that. That is madhyam awareness. And if someone is envious person, like, all right, keep distance means, and keeping distance here, Jaya Dharma, Srila Bhakti Thakur said, I mean, you don't talk about these things with these sorts of people. You keep it like cordial. So that is how I kind of understand. And the other idea of association that I heard that I also appreciate means accepting the same ideas as the people we associate with, taking on the same sort of metaphysics or concepts. So we have to be careful about that. That is why this digital media is so dangerous. We're hearing the podcast and hearing the YouTube and this, that. So that means by hearing, you will take on the same ideas as these people. So that is association. You take on the same ideas, then you're associating with them. So that thing we do not want to do. That's how I've understood it. That's how I've heard from sadhus. That thing we do not want to do. So we are preaching because we have a duty to fulfill to Mahaprabhu, to distribute the kripa that itself has been given to us. So we are fulfilling our duty out of love for Mahaprabhu, out of our love for our Gurudev. We are doing that duty. And when people see us, they also appreciate, right? Because they see we're very kind, we're considerate. We may hold space and hear even they reveal their hearts. We might reveal like a little bit just to show that we have relatability, not too much, because we don't know where you're standing yet, but we might reveal a little bit to show relatability. But that preaching is out of our love for Guru and Gauranga. And that's directly out of our love directed at them. But the nature of the love for Guru and Gauranga is that anyone who comes in contact with such a loving person, they themselves feel loved. So even though we're preaching and they themselves will feel loved by that preaching, it is because of the love that we're carrying for Guru and Gauranga. So they're feeling that even though it is not really directed at them. So if you water the root of the tree, all the leaves get nourished also. So they're like, wow, this person really loves me. That is okay. It is not fully false also, but it is not love directed at them. It is love directed at Guru and Gauranga, and they're getting that experience of that. So that's kind of how I understand that. And then, that way we're not actually associating. We are fulfilling our dharma and our duty to Guru and Gauranga. That's how I reconcile that. I hope that's okay. Okay, so there was one other question online or some other question you can ask. Sean. Okay, go. Yes.
Hare Krishna, this is Brajarani. Thank you. As always, there's so much food for thought here. And discussions that talk about aparad always kind of scare me.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm also scared.
And in the stories you told today, the Leelas you told today, the aparad was pretty gross. But right. It seems, but what scares me is not gross aparad. What scares me are the small ways in which one can offend others. And that the more time one spends with devotees, the greater the possibility of doing so. And I'm wondering if and ways in which you may not even be aware of.
Right.
And whether or not, or what's the effect? Does it have the same effect as a sort of gross example that you just gave?
It's a good question. How I've understood that, also coming from Srila Bhakti Thakur and his Jaya Dharma, when he makes distinction between, there's 3 stages of chanting, Nam, Namabhas, Namaparad. So the way he makes distinction between this is Shuddha Nam and then Na Aparad and Namabhas. So when the way he makes distinction between Na Aparad and Namabhas is he said Namabhas, they're like small aparads. And in Nam Aparad, they're like major. And so the idea here is that, and when we call something Nam Aparad, it means there's an intention to offend. There's an intention to blasphemy. There's an intention to kill. For example, there's intentional anger directed at a Vaishnav, or there's some like very deep misgiving that causes you not to feel happy when you see Vaishnavas. So there's something that's very intentional there when there's non-aparad. And Namabhas, it is not intentional. The intention is to come to the platform of chanting purely. But because of our ignorance and our anartha, so there are some mistakes that are being made along the way. Those are very small. So they may slow down the movement toward the perfection, but they do not how you say, obscure it. Whereas in non-aparad, you get obscured because of the intentionality in the action that is being done. So in that sense, the smaller aparads that are done are not to be, I don't think they're to be feared as much. Obviously, there has to be the humility that my consciousness requires evolution and refinement. And to the degree we are not committed to evolution and refinement of our awareness, to that degree, we're entering into a field that will, destroy us. We should think that way, because it's also true. On the one hand, we're not purposefully committing offenses, but on the other hand, we're not serious about evolving. So the result of not being serious about not revolving is that you go backwards. Prabhupada would give the example of swimming in a river that has strong current. You're swimming against the current when you're in Maya. And so if you just decided like, you know what, I'm gonna just tread the water a little bit. I'm not gonna try to offend, but I'm not gonna really try to push forward either. So the result is you get pushed down. So with the smaller aparad stuff, it seems that it's not held against, it slows down movement, but it doesn't stop it at all, provided we are serious about moving forward, in refining our awareness in all humility and so on. But if we don't, and then we enter this space where we're intentionally doing, then that is not aparad, and the effects are very powerful. And those are the effects that Jiva Goswami speaks about, slackening of bhakti, entering into sense gratification, and so on. So that's kind of how I understand that particular subject. There are consequences to not being serious about advancing, or not improving. And, sometimes you're like, I'm not harming anyone. And like modern society, we feel like that. I'm not harming anyone. You do your thing, I do my thing. But there are actual consequences for not moving forward. And so we have to be prudent about that, I suppose, and try to actually move forward. And then less and less that thing will happen because we'll be refined. We'll be so sensitive to that. But yeah, so that's how I understand that. I hope that satisfies, it makes it a little less scary.
That was really, really quite helpful. And if you're not moving forward, like you're never standing still. You're either moving forward or you're drifting backwards.
Right. Exactly.
And I love that idea that it is the intent to progress is really the essential thing. That's the focus, right? So thank you very much. It was really helpful.
Okay, should I take these other smaller questions? Are there, Gorshan? Is it okay? I guess there's no darshan.
Yes, so there's no darshan as long as we have time for it.
So Sham Saki says, your solution to slackened bhakti. Sometimes we commit a lot of offenses in mind, and it's a matter of time they come in words. Okay. So if you can't ask forgiveness, what more can you do? As you say, expose yourself to more bhakti, put yourself in the sun and be burnt. Okay. So if you can't ask for forgiveness, that you can do. Do you mean here if you can't forgive in your mind? Like in the sequence in which you've put it, it seems like that's what you're indicating. Clarification. Yeah, both ways. Okay, that's what so if you can't ask for forgiveness or you yourself having a hard time forgiving, and so your mind is dwelling on something that later on manifests itself as an offense. Like in the case of Gadadhar Pandit, he was only thinking. He didn't even say anything. He was only thinking, and that counted against him. At least the story is told to inform us that even thinking can be problematic. Offensive thinking can be problematic. Yeah, for this sort of stuff, I would say, honestly, you have to study the seventh canto very nicely. And the reason I say that is because seventh canto, the main topic of the first 10 chapters is to transcend friends and enemies. And who is the story that is given center stage for that? Prahlad Maharaj, who was persecuted in the most horrible of ways. and still he had no animosity toward his father. So I would say, like, I think I shared this idea with you before, Shamsaki, that if we want to go to the 10th canto, so 10th canto is Krishna consciousness, right? The consciousness of Krishna, that is 10th canto. So if you want to go to 10th canto, you got to move through 7th canto. 7th canto is the idea of transcending friends and enemies. And the example is Prahlad Maharaj, who had, one of the most terrible persecutions that a person can experience. A father persecuting his son in the most horrible ways. So one has to study that, not study only, one has to really sit and imbibe the teaching there, and then you have to live it. It is not that you can't forgive. Now, if you're asking for forgiveness, that is outside of your power. You're asking for forgiveness, someone can forgive or not forgive. But if you're looking to be forgiving internally so that you're not dwelling on the bad qualities of a devotee or faults of them, and then you have to improve your awareness in this particular way, transcending friends and enemies. And not only do you have to learn the teaching, you have to live it. So that's going to take some time, obviously. But it is a threshold that has to be crossed, because you can't have animosity with the environment and also be Krishna conscious. Because the nature of having animosity with the environment around you is that you will not be Krishna conscious. That's not possible. You cannot be having hatred toward family members around you or towards the people that live with you or that you work with, and also be aware of Krishna simultaneously. You will chant your japa and you will think of the hatred that you have for these people. So that is a major teaching that comes in the Bhagavad, that we have to transcend friends and enemies, so that it is possible to have the foundation to be fully aware of Krishna without obstacles. Ahetukiya pratiyata. So, yeah, I would say 7th canto is a very important canto. Maybe this is why Mahaprabhu so much liked hearing Prahlad Maharaj's story in the daytime. In the nighttime, he was hearing the more juicy stuff. But in the daytime, when he was in public, he would hear the stories of Prahlad Maharaj 100 times over, and Dhruva Maharaj. So there's something to that. Maybe this Prahlad Maharaj is a very important point for us. The story is about this theme, transcending friends and enemies. That's the whole theme of the 7th canto. So we have to cross through that threshold. It is an important threshold to cross, especially nowadays where you see the tendency to develop friends and enemies very easy. In the digital universe, even devotees are at each other's throats over disagreements on whatever issues, social and political and so on. So how you will be Krishna conscious? You're now developing hatred for devotees also? How you will be Krishna conscious? Then that is not possible. So I would say sit with that 7th canto. You go on some nature hike, some retreat for 2-3 days. You do some fasting, a little fasting from sense gratification, specifically the digital media. So it's just you and 7th canto Bhagavatam. And you sit and you really think about these words and let them enter inside. And then you start applying immediately with everyone around you. It will take some time to correct the problem, but that is a quick practical thing I'm suggesting. Obviously, there's a lot of internal work that has to go on, but I'm going to stick to this. Okay, it says here, yeah, okay, so I answered that. Athena says she has a quick question.
Hare Krishna JJP, Dandavat Pranams. Really nice session as always. I guess I have a few clarifying questions. You had mentioned that for a pure devotee, these material, input gets burned up in the mind of a pure devotee, and thus they're not disturbed. And this definition, I'm just clarifying, a pure devotee is one who has reached bhav and prema. Is that correct? Not just, for example, is that for one who has reached bhav and prema, such material input gets burned up in the mind?
Yes.
Okay. And then because when you reach bhav and prema, you no longer commit offenses, then there is also no possibility that at any point these material inputs could ever affect the mind.
Yes.
Okay. And then for the jiva mukta, because they are completely detached from the material, my guess is hypothetically, without any offenses, these material inputs also get burned up in the mind. It's only when one commits offenses that these material inputs have any effect.
Yes.
Okay, so as the Jiva Mukta, without even reaching Bhav and Prema, also these material effects are burned up in the mind. But because the difference is that the prayer devotee, when one that has reached Bhav and Prema, there is absolutely no possibility of offenses. Whereas for the Jiva Mukta, there's the possibility of offenses, and thus the ability to fall down due to, and then these material inputs affecting the mind.
Yeah, so you can say in different ways, but there's another difference. So the Jiva Muktas, who are Gyanis, so we've discussed this many times, but Maya has two potencies, the Avidya Shakti and the Vidya Shakti. There are two Shaktis of Maya, Avidya and Vidya. So by the Avidya Shakti of Maya, our self-awareness is obscured. By the Vidya Shakti of Maya, we become aware that we're not the body. But that is also the Vidya Shakti of Maya. So you're still not out of Maya. That is a problem. So the devotee who becomes Jiva Mukta, he is out of Maya because he is imbued with the Vidya Shakti of the internal energy. It is a different potency that is imbuing his awareness. And so that is another difference. So that's why Krishna says in Gita, for example, Daiviyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Daratya. Only if you surrender unto me, you can come out of this gunas of nature. Otherwise, the awareness of the Jiva Mukta who's a Jnani is still connected to Maya. That's why if you commit some offense, again, you go back to Maya. Actually, you've not really been out of Maya. Whereas the awareness of the Bhakta is infused by the internal energy, a separate energy. So there is a categorical difference between these two also. And not just the fact that one commits offenses, the other one doesn't. And that is why this teaching is coming, that even for this Jiva Mukta, he has to give up Gyan and just depend on Bhakti to come out of Maya finally, to attain his Sadhya. If his Sadhya is, Brahma Labh, he wants to attain the Brahman realization. Then he has to give up that Gyan also and just depend on Bhakti to take him to that particular goal. Gaudiya, as we say like this. So that is another difference there. There is a categorical difference also, because Bhakti is in a spiritual category, whereas the Jiva Mukta not fully spiritual yet. That's why the Bhagavatam verse says, Avishuddha Buddhaya, that they think they are liberated, because they are Jiva Mukta, but they are Avishuddha Buddhaya. Their intelligence is still not pure. The idea here is that is because they're still connected to Maya, the Vidya Shakti of Maya. So that's called Vishuddha Buddha. They're still not pure. So that is another difference, another way of describing it.
Thank you. And to check, this pure devotee, when you say out of Maya, it's technically out of the Jiva Maya and the Guna Maya, but yet can still be encapsulated in a material body.
When we say out of Maya, we mean that he has bhakti. So the nature of bhakti is that it removes Maya. Maya vyudhyasa chit shakti. The nature of the internal energy is that it removes Maya. Just like Krishna is saying, or Mahaprabhu is saying, Krishna is like the sun and Maya is like darkness. Wherever there's sun, darkness cannot have any connection. So that is the difference. So when we say he is out of Maya, that means he's fully imbued with bhakti. So Maya cannot touch him. That is the meaning.
Thank you so much for the beautiful explanation. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we'll stop here. Thank you all very much for tolerating me. I know it wasn't as together as I like to have. I like my presentations a little bit more methodical. But anyway, I did the best I could. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There was so much to learn from this session, bro. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Haribo.
Jaya Jagannath Prabhu ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.